at some point, you have to kill your father, symbolically, metaphorically, and at some point, your father has to die within you. At some point, you have to live as though your father's dead, because unless you really release him fully, there will always be a part of you that is seeking his validation and approval, and you won't be able to fully step into your own power as a king and as a man.
You're listening to the Building Men podcast with Dennis and Anthony Miralda, brothers on a mission
to help you become the strongest version of yourself, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically.
Building Men podcast. I am your host, Dennis Miralda, and today I am joined by the host of Soul Talk podcast. He is the author of You Are the One. He is a transformational teacher. His name is Kute Blackson. Welcome to the podcast, Kute. Nice to meet you.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. So my favorite name of any guest we've had on in 125 episodes, Kute Blackson. So tell me first about the name. I'm so interested. Is that a family name?
Which part?
The Kute part.
Kute is from Ghana. Actually, my full name is my official name is Kute, and that's from Ghana, West Africa. My father's from Ghana. My mother's Japanese. I grew up in London. Now I live in the US and Mexico and all over the place. So I feel like I'm a citizen of the world. I was named after the former president of Ghana, a guy called Ignatius Kute Champon. I have the whole name. Ignatius Kute Champon was on my birth certificate. My mother said, we're not calling my kid Ignatius. So we went with Kute, and then my nickname became Kute for short. And people said, how do you spell it? And I thought, well, how do you spell Kute? K-U-T. And then I just added an E on the end to make the pronunciation easier. And that just became my name. And so, but legally it's K-U-T-U, which is a name from Ghana, West Africa.
I love that. And whenever your name has a specific story that you can connect not only with your family lineage, but also it's geographical. It takes a journey throughout the entire world. So I appreciate you sharing that. When I started following along with the Soul Talk podcast, it's really interesting. I would equate it for the Building Men audience to the closest thing to a Jay Shetty On Purpose podcast that I have heard out there. You go so deep into so many different areas that you have a couple hundred episodes, 300 or 400 episodes right now on the Soul Talk podcast. And I'll tell you what, if you're struggling with anything in life, go take a look at that podcast. You will find information. You will find advice on anything in the entire world that you're struggling with. And the way that you present it is very approachable. So I have loved diving into this podcast. And basically, it's soulful conversations and exploring who you are, why you are here, and how to live your most authentic life, which definitely jives with the Building Men podcast. So I truly appreciate it. So let's start with your origin story. You mentioned you grew up in Ghana, and you have an interesting story about the dynamic with your father and his experience working in the spiritual realm, and what he almost this prescribed thing that was set up for you. Like you were supposed to do something based on your father's, background. So if you could give us a little bit of the origin story into that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I born in Ghana, West Africa. My first memories as a young boy was a couple of things. Firstly, I always felt an intuition. I felt people very deeply. I was a very sensitive kid, very empathic in nature. So I'd feel people's pain. And there was always a deep desire inside of me to alleviate people's suffering. I just didn't know as a 6-year-old kid how I would do that exactly. But I feel people. And so, but also as a young boy, I grew up seeing blind people see and deaf people hear. And one of my first memories was literally seeing a crippled woman crawling on the floor, mangled hands and legs. And she picks up, surrounded by thousands of people, she picks up the sand that this man walks on, wipes it on her face, and stands up. And so week after week, I grew up seeing these miracles. And that was a miracle. And this man was the man whose sand she picked up was my father. And so my father would look at a woman in a wheelchair and say, stand up, or look at a person with crutches who come in on a Sunday and say, take your crutches away. Do you believe? If you believe, walk. And my father built 300 churches in Ghana, West Africa, hundreds of thousands of followers. He was the spiritual advisor, teacher, counselor to the King of Ghana, presidents of Ghana, heads of states of, countries in Africa. He had a huge church in London, 4,000 to 5,000 people every Sunday in South London. So I grew up in this environment of, you could say, spirituality and service. That was my life. That was what I knew, and my whole family was up to that. And when I was age 8, I started to speak in my father's churches. I was thrown into the audience one Sunday, and my father, by the way, I was more interested in playing soccer and watching soccer and, being naughty with my friends. And my father realized that, so they plunked me on the front row, forced me to sit there. I'd fall asleep. And one Sunday, my father says, "My son is giving the sermon. He's going to speak today." And so I had no idea, half asleep, I was thrown on stage. And that's when something began for me. That's when words just kind of started pouring out of my mouth. I didn't really know where they were coming from, but there was a flow. And the very first talk I gave, people were in tears, and that began my speaking career. And every month, every few weeks, every few months, I would speak in front of my father's audience and congregation. And that also set me on a quest of trying to understand life. I was very inquisitive in nature in terms of just trying to understand, like, who am I and why am I here? Where do we come from? What's the purpose of life? And I got a scholarship to a school that was very prestigious. It was like Eton, one of those schools, a public school in a school called Dulwich College, where I went to school with the president's sons. And so I got a scholarship to the school with people that should have every reason to be happy, but were often miserable. And then my father's congregation was sort of a bunch of, misfits in a sense, and have every reason to be unhappy, yet seem to be really happy, fulfilled, and generous. And so this dichotomy made me question a lot, like, what's the purpose of life? Is it to go to work, make money, make babies, go on vacation, buy a house, and then die? Like, surely there has to be more to life. And so why are we here? What is existence? What is the purpose? And this sort of set me on an obsession of reading. And in my father's bookshelf, he would have literally 2,000-3,000 books from everything from religion, world religions, Western mystics of people like Blavatsky, to Eastern mystics of people like Krishnamurti and Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, to Joseph Murphy, to Science of Mind, to Christianity, to Robert Schuller, to Billy Graham, to Tony Robbins, Zig Ziglar, Jim Rohn, Deepak. All these folks were on his bookshelf. And so as a kid, I just started devouring everything in my spare time. And this became my obsession. I go to school, do my homework, be done by 5 or 6, read books for 4 hours, meditate. I had all these spiritual experiences. And so when I was 14, my father suddenly announces, my father and I, we weren't close. And he just suddenly announced to the congregation one day, "My son is taking over my ministry." And 5,000 eyes on me. The word spread to Africa. Everyone went crazy. And my heart sank in that moment, because I was going down this path, but when you're a kid, you don't really think about it until there was this reality. And it was more this sense of feeling and knowing that this wasn't my soul's trajectory. This wasn't my soul's expression. It wasn't my path. It was my father's path. And him and I never really discussed it. And so my entire life was, shall we say, set out for me. My life was planned out, all these expectations of who I was going to be and what I was going to do. And I just didn't feel aligned. And, as a 14-year-old kid who looked up to his father, I didn't have the courage to speak my truth. And I think many times we're afraid of really speaking our truth and being who we really are, because the fear is, if I dare to speak my truth and be who I am, you won't love me if you know who I am. And so often we hide who we are, we hide our truth, we betray ourselves, we compromise ourselves. And that's what happened. And so I got ordained as a minister. I went through this whole ceremony, it was a big deal. For 4 years, from 14 to 18, walked that path, all the while knowing inside, in my deepest heart, that this was not aligned. And I was depressed, I was unhappy, I was miserable, I just so much internal turmoil. When I was 18, I had to make a decision, because what do I do with my life? Do I go to university? I chose not to go to university because I wanted to go into this field of self-help and spirituality, and figured if I want to help people with life, I have to live life. You know, in school won't really give me that. And so I chose not to go to university. And then I thought, what am I going to do? And I was kind of meditating, praying one day, and I looked into my future. And I felt this calling. Yeah, I felt this calling to come to the US, to come to Southern California, to come to Los Angeles, because all of the authors, Jack Canfield, Tony Robbins, Louise Hay, Marianne Williamson, Deepak Chopra, they all lived in Los Angeles and San Diego. And I thought, this is the Mecca. There's something in the water here. I have to come here. And so I felt this deep calling in my soul to come to the US. No idea how or why. And I think sometimes what I found is your soul will give you guidance that doesn't always make sense to your conscious mind, and you won't always know how you're going to do it. But the key is to say yes. And I said yes to that completely. But now I realize I have to speak to my father and confront my father and speak my truth. And so I looked into my future. And I also realized that you can never be truly fulfilled and happy being someone that you're not. You can never be truly fulfilled and happy, doing something that is not aligned. And I looked into my future, age 20, age 30, age 40, age 50, age 60. And I felt such a pain in my heart because I felt like I was committing soul suicide to myself. And, I saw that you can be successful by everyone else's standards, but if you don't have yourself, if you don't have your truth, the success means nothing. And so that's when I made a decision to release my father. Cut a long story short, confronted my father, had the conversation with my father that I was most terrified of. And sometimes people think that you have to be fearless. I was terrified. And I think many of the things that we do in life, we will be terrified and we will be afraid. And that's where we have to access courage, because the next level of our life requires the next level of us, and the next level of us requires that we let go of what's no longer aligned or working, which is often terrifying. And as human beings, we tend to hold on to the known out of familiarity, safety, comfort, self-preservation. And so I had this conversation with my father, trembling, terrified, 18 years old, thought my life was over, but I knew what I had to do. And I think many of us, we know deep down what we have to do. The sad thing is, many of us, we don't do it, and we end up wasting 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, or the rest of our lives, and then we die full of regret. And so I decided I don't want that to be me. I had this conversation, told my father, I'm not taking over. All he said was, are you sure? I with a trembling voice, I said yes, and we didn't speak for 2 years. We didn't speak for 2 years. I thought he was going to scream. It would have been better if he screamed and threw stuff. We didn't speak for 2 years, which was maybe even more painful. But I knew that I was on the right path. I knew that this was true deep in my soul. And in that moment, I felt so alone, so abandoned by, the only supporter I had was my mother. I felt so abandoned by life and God. I thought, God, I felt you dropped me in the desert and I have this vision. And how on earth is it going to happen? And I felt so alone. And I said a prayer one day in a library at school, 17 years old, almost 18. And I said, universe, God, you've given me this vision. I feel it's so right. Yet I'm just in the darkness. Don't leave me here, And I thought I read maybe 700 books, and all these books I read talked about the power of faith, the power of intention, the power of visualization, the power of positive thinking. I thought, if this stuff is real, I need to know that it's working right now, that I'm on the right path right now. Follow your dreams. The universe will support you. I need to know that this stuff works. And literally within maybe an hour, maybe even half an hour, but it was soon, in that library, someone hands me a magazine called The Economist. The universe gives you clues. And I'm like, okay, I look at the back of the magazine. In the back of the magazine, there's an advertising section. It says the American government's giving away 55,000 green cards in the green card lottery. And I felt chills in my body. And that's when I knew, I need to apply. Long story short, I applied. Months later, I won. I was told that unless you hear by September the 18th that you've won a green card, from April I applied, by September the 18th, unless you hear that you've won, just move on with your life, because no one's going to give you a nice letter that you haven't won. And so every day, right, I'm visualizing myself in America. I'm practicing visualization, the law of attraction before it was, popular. I'm visualizing, I think it was Clinton shaking my hand, George Bush, the president at the time, welcoming me to the US. And I'm looking at maps of Los Angeles, California. I already knew LA more than locals here because I studied the maps, and I really immersed myself into this understanding. And every day I didn't get a notification. September the 17th, nothing. I'm depressed, dejected, getting mad at God. I thought tomorrow I'm going to get a letter. Nothing. September the 18th, nothing. I figured maybe I was wrong. God has abandoned me. Life has just left me hanging. And I decided I was going to pack my bags. This was my commitment because I thought it was right. And I think many times when we are in a dark moment, we give up, even though we know it's right. And I think sometimes the challenges and the dark moments we go through it isn't that we are not on the right path. It's just that we need to go through something so we can grow through something, so that we can learn lessons and grow and evolve, so that we can develop the mental, the emotional, the psychological muscle and faith to become who we need to become. And so that day on September the 18th at night, I get a phone call in the middle of the night. My mother picks up. She says, "Kute, it's for you. It's some American person." And I pick up the phone. It was a law firm that I applied through. And he says, "Is this Mr. Blackson?" I said, "Yes." And he says, "I'm just calling to tell you, we just got notice today you've won a green card. And this has never happened to us before, but it's amazing." And I went crazy. And here's what was interesting. I went crazy. I'm jumping around, hugging my mom, like screaming at the top of my lungs at midnight, celebrating. And then I heard this voice. It was like God said, "Why you sound so surprised? Did you not believe? Like, you knew you were going to win. You knew this is your path. Why are you acting so shocked?" And that's when I felt so humbled of like, yeah, there is a deeper guiding principle in life, that is unfolding all of our lives. Call it whatever you want. And so won my green card, came to the US, 2 suitcases, $800, I think. Showed up in LA, knew no one, and began my life. And that's kind of what started my life. And when I found teachers and all the authors I'd read about, Tony Robbins, Zig Ziglar, Jim Rohn, Brian Tracy, all of these folks, harassed them, knocked on their doors, found them, studied with some of them, went to some of their seminars. And then I started traveling, went to Israel, studied with rabbis, and went to Thailand in monasteries, went to Peru with shamans, and just on a quest of trying to find answers. And it was really through my own inner healing and journey that I started working with people one-on-one, and then seminars, and expanded.
That is an unbelievable story. I picture there's a holiday movie that comes out every year. It's on Christmas Eve through Christmas Day, Christmas Story. Little Ralphie's waiting by the mailbox to get the little orphan Annie Dakota ring. Every day he's waiting. Every day he's waiting. Finally it arrives, and it's like the greatest moment in his life. And I could just picture 18-year-old Kute waiting every single day, but having the faith and not giving up. It's a really cool story, a cool journey. And I wonder, I wanted to get back to the conversation that you had with your father. So knowing at 14 years old that was not where you were going to go. For young men, the way that our father's approval of us is such an important
everything.
It really is. And so I give you all the credit. For me, it was my father's a blue collar worker, and he owns a painting business, and God bless him. He'll be 70 years old at the end of April, and he still is working. He still is working. For him, he wanted me and then my younger brother to take over his painting business. And when I told him I'm going to be a teacher, I remember that feeling of angst talking to him about it. Now, your father had this congregation of thousands of people, and you were the next in line to take over. That must have been really challenging for you. So what advice would you give to a young man who's listening right now, who's struggling with that? How do I have this difficult conversation with, my father, who I look up to, who is my role model in life? What advice would you give to someone who's struggling?
At some point, you have to kill your father, symbolically, metaphorically, and at some point, your father has to die within you. At some point, you have to live as though your father's dead, because unless you really release him fully, there will always be a part of you that is seeking his validation and approval, and you won't be able to fully step into your own power as a king and as a man. And so that was like the first initiation into my manhood. I think part of manhood is the willingness to face the consequences of your own actions and really embrace that, and so yeah, it was letting your father, and it doesn't mean you'll never speak to him, it doesn't mean you won't have a great relationship, but it's really the relationship with your father within your own self. It's really how you hold him within your own self. That's key. And so unless we really move beyond that approval, validation, daddy love me seeking, we'll always be little boys. And I think every true, authentic father should want that for their son, to empower their sons to be free, to fully be who they are. And I think that initiation is, somewhat missing in our culture, where the father says, I bless you, I release you, you're your own man, go do it, And so my father never said that to me, so I had to just freaking cut it off. I remember, this was crazy. Here I am, 14 years old in church. I was so afraid. I'll never forget this moment of like, oh my, because I knew what I had to do at 14. I knew what I had to do. It took me 4 years to muster the courage, but I knew what I had to do. And I was so terrified that I was going to never have a relationship with my father that I literally, it's kind of funny now. I was in London and I went and I found a psychic. I'm like, never been a freaking psychic. I went and found a psychic to try and like, is it going to be okay? What's going to happen? Tell me that am I going to lose my father? Like a psychic can really tell me, And he said, ultimately, you're going to be fine. You have to follow your path. You're going to be fine. I didn't believe him, so it took me another 4 years. But ultimately, you have to realize you're not here to please anybody. It's your life. At some moment, your father will die, your mother will die, those you love will die. And you have to, as a man, be willing to look yourself in the mirror in the middle of the night and feel your own internal character and your own internal respect. If you can't do that, you can have riches and power and fame, but you won't have your own respect. And if you don't have your own respect, it's hard to be truly in your power. If you don't respect yourself, none of that means anything, And so, look, it was difficult, it was difficult. And I think what you can do if you need to have a conversation with your father is really, well, number one, realize you're not here to live his life. You're not here to live his life. There's your life, there's his life. And you can have a conversation with love, with love, as in, I love you, I honor you, I bless you. I really appreciate that, everything you have done for me and done for sacrifices you made. And I feel this is my path. And I think there is a respectful, loving way to do it, for sure, But I think we have to make peace with, we're not here to ultimately, your job is not to make your father or anyone happy. Your job is to be authentic. Your job is to be true to yourself. I believe that the truth serves everyone. And if you're true to yourself, it will ultimately serve your father. And I realize that even me following my path on a spiritual soul level, because I believe we are all souls and we incarnate into this human experience to learn, to grow and evolve. And to me, life is a school or a curriculum for our soul's evolution. And everyone is our teacher. Your father, your mother, everybody. And so everyone is your teacher, everything is your classroom, everyone is your professor. And so I think when we're true to ourselves, that's when we force other people to face parts of themselves. That's when you force your fathers to grow and evolve and mature and expand and deepen their own capacity for growth and authenticity and loving. And when we hold back our truth, we kind of shortchange another person of expanding their own souls to a bigger dimension of loving. And so it's not easy, but I think I would ask every man, what would it be like to live as though your father were dead? And are you living as though, or is there always a part of you going, oh, I can't do that because my father, I can't do that because what my father would say, I can't do that. Then you're not truly a free man. You're still a boy. And so I think that shift is what really gets to happen. and then face the consequences of your actions. One of the things that I see as a whole blocks people from truly being free as men, as human beings, are all of the lies that we tell ourselves. As human beings, we are constantly lying to ourselves, rationalizing, BSing, making excuses. We stay in relationships that aren't aligned because we invested so much into it. We work jobs that compromise our integrity and our truth, that we know this is not the reason I was put on the planet, but we stay in it out of comfort and out of safety and what will people think, and oh my God, self-preservation. And so, or we've succeeded, but we're miserable inside, and we know this is not why I was here. And so in so many ways, we lie to ourselves about who we are, why we are, what our purpose is. And so you cannot be truly free, fulfilled, and happy living a lie, telling a lie. And so I think freedom and happiness on one level is simple. I would just say, feel the truth, acknowledge the truth, speak the truth, tell the truth. The truth will set you free. The truth is real, shall we say, spiritual practice. It's real spiritual practice is telling the truth. And so if there's one thing that you're willing to do, ready to do, if you want to break free, is tell the truth to yourself about what's real, what you feel. And I think in many ways, we're afraid to tell the truth because we're afraid of the consequences. So three questions. Number one, sit with what lies am I telling myself? Like, what lies am I telling myself? And be radically honest about that. I'm in a relationship. I'm not happy. I work a job. I'm miserable inside. Sometimes we even use gratitude as an override to allow us to continue doing what we're doing. So don't use even gratitude, but just get in touch with the truth. I'm miserable. I'm unhappy. I hate my job. Now, I always tell people, take the pressure off of having to even take any action, because sometimes the fear of taking action freaks us out to not be honest with ourselves. Like, oh, if I tell myself the truth that I'm not in love with my wife, or it's no longer working, it's no longer aligned, or my job isn't for me, I'm going to have to take action, and that freaks me out. So let me be a little confused. So if you take the pressure off of taking action and just start with, what is the truth? What is the truth? Even if it's uncomfortable. The truth is, this is not my path. The truth is, this is no longer aligned. This is no longer right. Then you can sit with that for a moment and just be with it for a moment. So what lies am I telling myself? Number two, what am I pretending to not know? Because in many ways, we play a game of confusion. Like, I'm not sure. I'm confused. I don't know what my purpose is. Deep down, we do know, but we're afraid if we really acknowledge, this is my purpose. This is why I'm here. We're going to actually have to do something and put ourselves on the line and take action, take a risk, which might mean failure. So, but if I'm confused, I can always live in the future fantasy of the possibility and not take action, put myself on the line. And so where am I being confused? What am I pretending to not know? And lastly, be willing to feel the pain. And so what is the cost of lying to myself? In many ways, we feel the pain. But we distract ourselves. We drink it away. We sex it away. We smoke it away. We drug it away. We, social media it away. And I would say that when we do that, we allow ourselves to perpetuate the misalignment. And so feel the pain. To me, pain is your friend. Pain is a messenger. Pain is simply showing you that something is not aligned. And if you can use the pain that you feel, the depression, the pain, the dissatisfaction that you might feel as feedback, it's a gift showing you, what's the truth you're not telling? Where are you not aligned? What changes do you need to make? And I think pain can show you where you're off so that you can realign and bring yourself back on.
I love that. Here's the thing too. You mentioned being able to look at yourself in the mirror.
Yes.
There's a poem called The Man in the Glass, and the last stanza is, you may fool the whole world down the pathway of years and get pats on the back as you pass, but your final reward will be heartache and tears if you've cheated the man in the glass. And what you said resonated with me. You could fool all the fucking people. You could look a certain way, could from the outside. But as you look at yourself in the mirror, you truly know, are you being truthful to yourself or are you lying to yourself? And if you are lying to yourself, you have to start right there. What can you do at this moment to start being
Right
true,
now.
honoring yourself in that deep way? The other thing that you said, Kute, that I love, when you think about, when you said kill the father, at first I took it, whoa, wait, that's pretty harsh. But I understand, like, being able to, that pedestal that you put your father up on, you need to, like, demolish that idea and start looking at yourself. So it's the kill the father idea, and then also kill the boy to become the man. You both ends of it. You have to stop looking at yourself as this little perpetual child. Like, you have to start doing the hard things. And some of the things that you mentioned, we're going through those things, going through the shit, going through those rites of passage. So what would you say if I'm looking at, for my son who's going to be 17 years old,
Wow.
rites of passage that he would need? One or two things that young men need to experience to go through to come out on the other side feeling that they have gone through that rite of passage to become a man.
I think men need challenge. Men grow through challenge. Men need responsibility. Men need accountability. Men need other men that don't put up with their bullshit.
Yes.
Men need that challenge and stretching. I think in so many ways we live in such a mollycoddled, comfort-driven, entitled society where everything is immediate gratification. Twitter, immediate; Uber, immediate; DoorDash, everything immediate. When in your day, my day, our father's day, our grandfather's day, shit, if they wanted something, they had to walk freaking like 4 hours for it.
Yeah.
They had to wait 2 weeks for that. Now, Amazon Prime, one day. What do you mean? We had to wait 4 weeks for that package to come. We had to make it ourselves. And so I think, this immediate access kind of softens our resourcefulness. It softens our resilience. It makes us a bit soft in a sense, and so we don't have to go hunt. We don't have to sit in the freezing cold when we could just turn on the heat. We don't have to stretch ourselves. And so I think as men, as boys, I think it's easy to lose that internal strength because we don't have to access those parts of ourselves anymore. It's easy to lose and when things are handed to us in a certain sense. And so I think that accountability challenge, take your kid in nature and throw him in nature and let him feel the elements and his connection to the earth so he feels his heart and his interconnectedness to life. Put him in challenging situations that he has to figure some stuff out where things aren't handed to him, because life isn't going to hand stuff to him. It's not how life works. And put him in some challenging situations, take them traveling, throw them in situations where they don't know, where they're out of their elements, where the comforts are taken away, where they have to tap into a dimension of their being, and so take them into the unknown, take them through an initiation of the hero's journey where they go into the unknown and they have to face themselves, to find themselves. I think all these are important. Push them to the edge as boys. Because I think men go through challenge, push them to the edge of their own capacity, where they have to face death. They have to face death in a certain sense of like, I don't think I can make it. I don't think I can run anymore. I don't think I can push anymore. Because it's through that they will have to tap into something when they face death. And I think there's something very powerful for all of us, men and women, but especially for men, the masculine, where we face death. And we begin to transcend the fear of death. Is a very powerful thing. But facing death is a really powerful thing for a man. And so I think when a boy can do that, that's why I think in Asian cultures, in Africa, what have you, these boys would be taken in the middle of the night by the men and taken somewhere and taken through some challenging rituals and initiations to have to overcome. And maybe if they didn't, then maybe they would die or they'd be lost for weeks, and they would have to get resilient and resourceful so that they could access the different dimension. And so I think that's important. And having, a community of men, being surrounded by men that can offer masculine energy and correction is really important. That male strength of, hey, what are you doing? Hey, with love, hey, and I think in so many ways we miss that. And so as little boys who maybe don't have fathers, don't have father figures, we kind of like little boys trying to figure stuff out on our own. you know, and we don't have to like level up, step up, be accountable. So I think all those things are important. So your son is lucky to have you, and I think the more you can, like when I have a kid at 17, I'm gonna take him to India, drop him in India, and just say figure shit out. Here's $3. Here's like $1. Go figure shit out and be at this location in 2 days. And to me that's kind of what I would say.
I appreciate that, and so succinctly summing up what the mission of Building Men is in that way of how do we go about creating that conversation, the community for young men to see men going through it, creating that community feel. So thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. And I love what you talked about, being able to sit in silence, being able to sit in those moments where things are not handed to you immediately, that immediate gratification, that if I want something, I can have it yesterday. You do a lot of work around a discussion around meditation. I was listening to one of your podcasts recently about your daily habits and what you're doing on a regular basis. And you were talking about getting up and doing something physical, going for an hour and a half, 2 hour run in the morning. And then you would sit in meditation for an hour, 2 hours. And over the course of the day, it could be up to 4 or 5 hours. And for me, as I meditate, it's one of the rituals that I put in place recently. I find myself, after a certain amount of time, I start thinking. And I start thinking, am I thinking, am I feeling, what's the emotion? And then I start thinking, why am I thinking this? And you start going down this rabbit hole of like all these different thoughts. For you to truly get into that state where you're able to meditate for a period of time, how long did it take you? What is your process for truly connecting with that spiritual sense through meditation? Was it slowly but surely you just gained that level of
Sure.
being able to do it? What was that process like for you?
Sure. I think this could be a podcast episode on its own.
By itself, right?
Yeah, but I'm going to try to sort of shortcut it a little bit and kind of compress some things, because I think there is also a misconception of meditation that we have as a culture that actually makes meditation more difficult than it really is, because we have preconceived ideas of what meditation is. So, we see the monk there sitting there for 4 hours or 2 hours, just like, no thoughts, completely blank, no mind, total stillness, never moves. Like, okay, that's what I have to do because that's what, that's the perception I have, right? And so then we sit and meditate and we're like, but I got these thoughts, shit, I'm not meditating correctly. Then we give up and then we get frustrated and, we get agitated. And so I think first we have to give up the preconceived idea of what we think meditation is, because the idea itself is causing us to not meditate. And I think the most difficult, so then if we say, okay, meditation is simple and easy, and meditation is simple and easy and it's effortless. And once we can sort of embrace that, you start realizing the most difficult part of meditation is actually sitting down. And I think many of us never meditate because we're let me say it this way. Meditation, real meditation in and of itself, symbolically, and I'm speaking to sort of the masculine audience here, is a death. Meditation is a death. That's why we resist it. I mean, I think many folks listening, like they know they should meditate, but somehow you just don't have the freaking time to meditate, right? Like, did you meditate? Well, no, because I was busy. 20 minutes. Well, and somehow there's always this, maybe you've experienced this, like this internal resistance, like to just freaking sit down and meditating every day for the next 10 years. Just somehow you don't do it. It's not hard. It's like sit down and do nothing. It's not hard. So what is this resistance? This resistance is the ego's resistance to dying. Because in a sense, real meditation, now, I'm not talking about meditation listening to a guided, music. I'm not talking meditation watching some lights or watching your breath. Real meditation, which is really allowing your awareness to transcend your mind, transcend your thoughts to a deeper dimension of your being, the deep dimension of pure being and consciousness. So where your attention drops down and you transcend yourself. So to me, meditation is the process where you transcend yourself, your egoic self-identity, and you go beyond to what is eternal, that deepest dimension of your being that is beyond birth, beyond death, that is pure consciousness, pure energy, pure beingness, that is the real essence of what we are, the divine spark inside of us that we truly are beyond this physical form, the soul, the essence, different labels. And so for the individual separate sense of self, you, me, Jim, Bob, Susie, that's terrifying for the ego that we have been conditioned to think we are, because when we meditate for a moment, you go beyond, you drop deeper, you drop deeper, you drop deeper. The egoic attachment and identification begins to dissolve. And then, oh shit, for the ego, whose job is to preserve and reinforce its existence, it's scary. We control, we do things, we control, we want to be in control, create drama, all this stuff, because that's the ego's way of like reinforcing its existence. I'm alive, I'm here, I'm here, I'm alive, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, I exist, I'm alive, control, I'm in charge, rather than realizing that like God's in charge, the infinite is in charge, the universe is in charge. We're not really in control, you know, truly. So control is the master of addiction, and control is the ego's way of trying to exist. And so real freedom comes as we let go of control. Then we can open to the universe, then we can get in flow, then we surrender. You know, Jesus said, it's not I that does the work, it's the Father, life, the universe, whatever label you want to put, that does the work through me. To me, that is the ultimate state of freedom, where you realize you are not the doer. Life is, the divine is, the universe is doing and functioning all of existence as you, as me. Then you're in the flow. Then you're open to grace, then you're open to miracles, then you're open to life, then you're open to being lived through and used through and manifested through. So meditation truly is a process of transcending your self-identity as you drop down, and there's a natural gravitation of your awareness to drop the deeper dimensions of beingness. And that process is very scary for the ego. And so what we tend to do is we focus on objects in the world. We try to control objects in the world. Even in our meditation, objects, light, music, the body, breath, visualization, an object. You see, in order for an experiencer to exist, an experiencer as in me, as in you, in order for experiencer to exist, there has to be an object of experience. Some object, music, sound, light, things, stuff, an object of experience. The object in the experiencer is in the relative. The relative is this dimension of the world, the 3D. When you go in meditation, when you go beyond, see, to me, meditation is an effortless process of your awareness dropping deeper and deeper and deeper. And so when in meditation, when you transcend or you go beyond an object, you're not focusing on your thought, you're not trying to do something, control something, you go beyond an object, then the experiencer, then you're left without object, experience, and process of experiencing. So when you transcend and you go deeper in meditation, this process of going to deeper dimensions of your awareness, when you transcend, the subtlest level of objective experience, sights, sounds, visuals, thoughts, music, the body. When you transcend the subtlest level of objective experience, the individual, you and I, this perceived sense of self, merges into being, merges into God, merges into the divine, in the oneness. That's where Jesus said, I and my Father are one. At the deepest level, there's a oneness, And so I think meditation, that's why, is a process of dying. It's a process of releasing. It's a process of letting go. And that's why one of the scariest things of the ego is to let go of control. That's why even in meditation, what do? We try to control the whole process. We try to control letting go and getting rid of thoughts and not having thoughts. But we're still reinforcing our sense of control. And that's why I say meditation should be an effortless process. If thoughts arise, let them arise. Just kind of allow them to float through. If things arise, allow them to float through. Real meditation, I found, is a process of purification of the physiology and the nervous system. And so sometimes thoughts might arise, as a release from your nervous system, a release from your body. And that's okay. So the goal of meditation is not to not have thoughts. Because if you're like, the goal is to not have thoughts. Now, when thoughts arise, you start fighting those thoughts and you never get out of that loop. But when thoughts arise, observe those thoughts and let them float by. Observe the thought and eventually your awareness will drop down naturally, without attaching to those thoughts, without fighting those thoughts, without resisting those thoughts. And meditation becomes more effortless in the process of non-doing. But even the ego wants to even do in meditation because that's a sneaky way to reinforce itself. So that's a little bit. And so for me, I don't do 4 or 5 hours of meditation now. There was a period 18, 19 years ago as a young man where I had no money, I had nothing to do. And it's like, screw it, let me just meditate because I didn't have, there was nothing I had there's no job I had to go to. And so that really helped me build an inner foundation. So as men, I would say, yes, cultivate a meditation practice, because as men, many times, the masculine drive that we have as a masculine is for freedom. There's a masculine drive to be free in life. And unless you have I think this is really important for men, unless you have, and this will also explain many things, unless you have a spiritual practice of transcending yourself, going beyond your cuteness, your Billness, Johnness, Daveness, your identity, unless you have a spiritual practice of transcending yourself, going beyond yourself, you will often feel limited in life, limited in your own identity, limited in your own ego, limited as you. And that's when we as men will tend to try to seek a sense of freedom in the world. Freedom through sex. Okay, sex. Let's take sex, because I think for guys, sex is kind of a deal. It's a topic, right? What happens in sex? You make love to your woman, make love to your wife. Why? Because in that moment of orgasm, like boom, what happens? Explosion, you're gone. As men, in the moment of ejaculation, you dissolve for a few seconds. Boom. And that is the sense of freedom that as the masculine, we're seeking, the freedom for ourselves for a moment. And it's so blissful because I don't exist. And as men, what we mistakenly do is like, wow, that felt so good because I wasn't there. I was free of my thoughts. We're often not having the orgasm and thinking, I'm having the orgasm. What am I going to do tomorrow? Oh my God, the bills I have to pay. It's just like, boom, gone. This dissolution, freedom for myself. That's why it's so blissful. Then we come back like, oh shit, now I'm back again. And so what ends up happening is, man, we like, wow, I was free when I was making love and I had the orgasm. So let me keep chasing that. And so what we don't realize is we get addicted to like sex as an example, nothing wrong with it, because what we're seeking is the sense of freedom from self that we feel. So when you have a spiritual practice through meditation, or let's say prayer, or some practice where you're transcending your sense of self, then you are accessing the source of freedom that is within you. The real source of freedom that is within you, no longer dependent on the world. You're no longer dependent on the world to give you freedom. And as a man, you are free. That, as a man, is real power.
And it's so interesting as well, because I think about myself with the practice of meditation. It was something that I would schedule, make sure I had to do by 6 o'clock every morning. I would put on the Headspace app. It was fighting what it should really be. It became so much more about the product of saying that I checked that off my list to take care of my mental health, rather than the process of what you had just mentioned. I find it interesting as well. The way that you think about things is so deep. Your spiritual practices as well. A couple things that I wrote down that I listened to you talk about was the spiritual gymnasium and but I'm also interested, because I also want to respect your time. You talk about anything and everything on the Soul Talk podcast. You talk about loneliness, decisions, happiness, fear, purpose, meditation, relationship. Like, you name it, you dive into it and you talk deeply about it, either a solo cast or you interview someone about it. What is your process? Do you sit down and like write down the word decisions and then just sit and think about, how do you think about this? Do you think about loneliness and then think about, because as you speak on your podcast, it's so
Sure.
insightful and deep. You've spent a lot of time diving into this and fully going through it, which I mentioned at the very beginning. Someone who's released 300 plus episodes, I hold in high regard. I know how hard it is to do that, and you have to think deeply about it. So what is your process as a topic comes up? What do you go through to talk about one of these
Yeah,
topics?
really, first, what I'll try my best to feel what people or my audience or what people are going through, and really feel what they're going through, the challenges we're going through as a humanity, what my clients are going through. Because if I just talk about stuff that's not really relevant to them, then who cares? Because I really want to serve them. And so I'll think about the biggest pain, problems, or challenges that my audience are going through in that moment or as a whole. Feel into them, put myself in their shoes, feel what is it that they need, what is it that they need to understand about this topic, and also feel from my experience, and my own understanding about this topic, what I've learned, and because I think you can only teach as deep as you've been yourself. And sure, you can read someone else's information, but that's one thing. But to go through something and be able to speak about it from within carries a different energy. And so I'll feel with the topic what I feel about it, what I've lived through it, and see how I can present my perspective, which tends to be, typically a little different than the typical perspective, how I can present that in a simpler or practical way. And that's really what I'll seek to do. And just, I don't really write a whole bunch of stuff. I just sit and turn the recorder on and just kind of flow, to be honest, like we're doing now. Just like I have no idea what this conversation was going to be. And so I think when we allow ourselves to tap into the deepest dimension of ourselves, all of us, there's a part of us that knows everything at the deepest level. And so I just like to trust that and allow, when I record my Soul Talk episodes, for that wisdom to come through me the best I can allow it to come through me. Then it's then it arises from an even deeper place than my own personality or ego identity. It arises from the deepest dimension of me. And that's really what I seek to do. And I just turn the recorder on, let things flow.
And I think wisdom is a perfect word. As I was preparing for this, that was a word that I wrote down as far as how I believed you to be a very wise human being. You mentioned before, everything and everyone is a teacher.
Yeah.
And I truly agree with that, 100%. My last question for you, Kute, is one thing I'm really fascinated with is the men that we've had on the podcast. At the end, I ask, what is one thing that the audience can do starting tomorrow, starting when they hit pause on the podcast, that they can do to put into play to change the trajectory of their life? And the answers that I've received have been, you name it. I've asked it 100 times and I've got 100 different answers. So I'm so curious. And if there's one thing, it could be anything in the world that someone could do starting right now that can change the trajectory of their life, what would that one thing be?
There's a few things. Like one thing I said, which I've already said this, so I'm going to not include this, but tell the truth. That's one thing for sure. Like if you're going to start somewhere, get real and start telling the radical, honest truth to yourself and living that, your life is going to change. Your life will change. And even the things you pray about, dear God, help me with this, will already dissolve because you'll already make changes. You won't even have to pray about some of those things because those problems that you're praying about will already change. And so the truth is a profound practice. So that's the bonus. So just to answer your question now, here's what I would invite people to sit with. And I'll start by saying this. I will tell every man listening that you are going to die. You're going to die. Like really hear that. You are going to die. Now, obviously, your soul is eternal. Your soul, whatever you believe, happens, in the afterlife, etc., etc., etc. So, at the deepest level, we're beyond death, beyond birth. We're eternal beings. Got that. But in this form, in this dimension, as you're gonna die. The time is coming. Me, you, Bob Marley, Buddha, Muhammad Ali, Bruce Lee, Nelson Mandela. At some moment, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, they all died. You're going to die. The sooner you can, basically, I'm saying face your death. Feel your death. Face your death. Make death your friend. Feel death each moment. Feel death in the morning. Feel death at night, and hold death close. Look death in the eyes and feel the reality. We often live like we're going to live forever. Like, I've got time. When I retire, 4 years from now, I'm going to launch that book. I'm going to write that thing. And then we end up wasting so much time. We end up, procrastinating, manufacturing stuff, living in comfort zones, not telling the truth because we think we've got time. And the truth is you don't. You're going to die. And so we're so busy avoiding death that we don't feel death. Every day, feel your death. Today could be my last day. This moment could be my last moment. Is this how I want to die? The people in 9/11 had no idea that they weren't going to come home that day. The people in, the earthquake or the disaster or Ukraine or, they had no idea that they weren't going to come home that day, be able to look their wife or their spouses in the eyes and say, I really love you, or I know we have this problem, but please forgive me. Please forgive me. I'm sorry. I was wrong. And so what would you need to do? What would you need to say? What would you need to give? What would you need to communicate? What would you need to create? So if death came right now, you would have no regrets. If death came right now, what would your regrets be? And what would you need to do and live so that if death came, you'd have no regrets? Because I think if you can face your death and feel your death, then you feel the urgency of now, the urgency of this moment, to love fully, to love fiercely, to give your gift to the world. And so to me, life is short. Feel your death. You're going to die. How do you want to die? And what do you need to do to die with no regrets? Because for me, a successful life is not how long you live. Living till 80, living till 90, living till 200. There's a lot of folks that we want to live forever. What's the point of living forever if you're not living fully and truly and authentically and loving fully? To me, the quality of life is not how long you live, it's how you live the life you have right now. And so feel your death. And if you feel your death, not as some morbid thing, right? But if you feel your death, then let that sober you up to the preciousness of each moment and those around you so that you can give your gifts, your God-given gifts to the world right now, this moment, today. No excuses today.
Whew. That will be the final chapter in the Building Men book that I'm writing. As I'm taking little bits and pieces of information, that will be the closure. That'll be the guy coming in the ninth inning throwing 99 miles an hour. I could not say it any better. I truly appreciate that. I need to go have a cry right now. I need to go sit with my thoughts after this conversation. Kute Blackson, I truly appreciate you, my man. I have learned so much about life, about spirituality, about meditation, about thinking, just the process of thinking. Through this hour conversation today. I appreciate you. Where can the audience find you? Because I know they're going to want to listen to your podcast. Sure. They're going to want to buy your book. They're going to want to follow you on Instagram.
Thank you. Thanks for the conversation. Thanks for having me on. First thing I want to say is I want to invite everyone to a very special event I'm doing on May the 7th, depending on when you listen to this conversation. But May the 7th is Saturday. I'm doing a very special online seminar, 3 hours. We're going to deep dive. It's called Reinvent Live Online Seminar. It's really how to reinvent yourself, connect with who you truly are, share your gifts with the world, and live your purpose fully. And so if you're someone that wants to make an impact on the planet, if you feel a calling to serve the world in some way, you know that you have gifts and talents and creativity that you want to share with the world. I'm going to teach you the 7 phases of how to reinvent yourselves and how to unlock those gifts so that you can share them fully. And so Reinvent Live, May the 7th. You can go to the website for the seminar. It's Kute Blackson, my name, KUTEBLACKSON.com/reinvent seminar, KuteBlackson.com/reinvent seminar. And basically my paperback, the paperback version of my book, The Magic of Surrender, is coming out on May the 3rd. So all people need to do is you purchase the paperback, send your receipt or a copy of your receipt to that website. All the info's there. You get to attend the seminar for free, basically, as my guest. So 3 hours, 9 to 12 Pacific time, May the 7th. Join me there. I hope to see everyone. My website, KuteBlackson.com. I'm on Instagram, Kute Blackson, Facebook, Kute Blackson, and as you mentioned, Soul Talk, the podcast. So look forward to hearing from folks.
Absolutely. We will put all that information into the show notes. And if you send buildingmencoach@gmail.com, everything is a teacher in quotes, I will purchase one of Kute's books and send it to you as well. So the first person that gets me that information, I will send you a copy of one of Kute's books. For Building Men, you can find us. Our website is buildingmen.io. Our Instagram is building.men. Our email address, buildingmencoach@gmail.com. Thank you so much, Kute Blackson. This was truly an unbelievable experience for me and for the Building Men audience. Go a step further than you thought you can go. We'll see you next time on Building Men.